Welcome to a Pickwick Monthly, everyone. I am Edward G. Pettit of the Rosenbach Museum and Library in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and my Pickwickian co-host for today is James Armstrong. Hey, James, good to see you back.
Whoa. Yeah, good to see you. I'm toasting with my cold punch in a Mr. Pickwick tumbler, cold punch being in this case lemonade.
Nice. I like that tumbler. What was that?
Yeah.
Where did you come across
This
that?
was a gift. Yeah. This was given to me by a friend who knew I was into Dickens. Um I brought in earlier the Fat Boy tumbler when
That's
we were
right.
discussing
Yeah.
Joe the Fat Boy because uh, he's one of those characters that got reproduced over and over again. And I don't know how many people, if you talked to them today and said, what's one of the most beloved Dickens characters, would have chosen that one.
Yes, but
But yeah, he
Fat
was he
Boy
was
was
very
so
popular.
enormously
Yeah,
popular back then.
yeah.
Well, everyone, for 20 months, we are talking about Charles Dickens' The Posthumous Papers of the Pickwick Club as it was first serialized in monthly parts from March 1836 to October 1837. Once a month, myself and one of a rotating set of co-hosts talk about each serialized part. Along the way, we share some of the items in the Rosenbach's Dickens collections, including complete serial issues of the Pickwick Papers. We've already shared portions of the Pickwick manuscript, of which we have two different portions of. We also have many first editions signed by Dickens, the earliest surviving literary manuscript, letters, ephemera, a lock of Dickens's hair. Don't worry, I'll share that towards the end of this series. And in today's episode, number 15, chapters 41 to 43, Mr. Pickwick gets acquainted with life in the Fleet Street prison. Um, and it's a return to the serial. Dickens had taken a month off, and last month we did too, but we didn't take a month off of the show. Instead, took a we did a show on why Dickens took a month off, and that was because of the death of his 17-year-old sister-in-law, Mary Hogarth. And we talked about that, but now we're back just as Dickens's readers were in 1837. We're back to the story. James, you are. When was the last time you were on, James? It's been a few months, several months.
It
So
has.
I can't remember what parts you were on for the last time.
But I've been watching them all. It's always interesting to see what some of my fellow co-hosts come up with.
And I'm thinking about it today. I mean, what it's been like. It's been. I mean, um this is number 15, but it's actually episode 16.
Hmm.
And I it is, I mean, for 16 months, I've been living with Mr. Pickwick and Sam Weller and in this world. And um, it's exactly what the kind of feeling I was trying to create in doing it. At least it works that way for me. I hope it's working that way for, the audience too, that yeah, I just feel like I've been in their world so long. And when other Dickens things come along, it's for me, it's just everything's this overlay of Pickwick, and I could hardly kind of think about him later in life. At this point, I'm just stuck in this world, happily stuck in this world of Pickwick, young Dickens,
Mm.
and we will continue until October when we finish. Well, and you have also been busy doing with your Dickens group in New York, the Friends of Dickens of New York City, and you guys just finished Little Dorrit, right?
Yeah, we generally pick a novel and discuss it over the course of a year, not exactly lining up with the monthly installments as we've been doing, because then it would take more than 12 months. And we also generally take the summer months off so that people don't have to, in the hot of July and August, come out to the meetings. So we'll do like two installments or three installments in a month and discuss them. Always taking February off for Charles Dickens's birthday and have a big birthday luncheon every year.
Hmm.
So yeah, we're off for the summer. We're going to be meeting again starting in September, and we're going to be doing sketches by Boz. And we've broken up the different sketches, so we'll be doing different sketches each month, a group of them each month, with the exception of February when we'll do the birthday luncheon, and January when we will be doing the Chimes, which was one of the Christmas books, but
Nice.
it was actually really a New Year's book. It
Yeah.
all happens at New Year's. So we'll be discussing that in January, and then the rest of the months we'll be reading various sketches by Boz, or as Dickens and you pronounce it, sketches by Bose. Uh,
Osbo.
Dickens
Yeah.
Dickens, was like, no, it's Bose, B-O-Z, Bose. But I imagine most people of the time and today
That's what I think.
mispronounced it.
Yeah. It just looks like Boz. So.
Yeah, kind of like if you're familiar with Sophie Treadwell's most famous play, she pronounced it machinal, but basically everybody else calls it Mackinac. And so, whenever I'm bringing up that play with classes and stuff, I'm always like, Mackinac or machinal, however you want to pronounce it. Because the author had one way, you would say she's right, right? She's the author. But when you try to pronounce it the author's way, you're often pushing back pretty hard against a lot of the critics.
Well, we are going to talk a little bit. I'm going to mention a little bit about sketches by Bose in a minute. They to give a little Dickens, context from his life at the time when this issue's coming out. Uh, it's finally the Victorian age.
Yeah.
I constantly call it the Victorian age, and I'm corrected by people all the time because technically it's not really the Victorian age before Queen Victoria goes to the throne, and you could say that that takes time to develop for it to become the Victorian age anyway. You're really talking about mid-century when you can truly say this is the Victorian age. But William the Fourth has died, and Princess Victoria has ascended to the throne on June 20th of that year. She has become queen. There's a little mention of her a couple times in the at Pickwick Advertiser, which I really want to look at this week as well, or this month as well. And Dickens is back at writing after he had taken a couple weeks into the country with his wife Kate to grieve over Mary and to just get away from things for a bit. But Dickens was still coming back to town here and there, back to London to take care of business affairs. I mean, he's still the editor of Bentley's magazine, so he can't just let everything go. But it's interesting to look at the letters in the Dickens letters collection and see how
Mm.
how much fewer letters there are at the end of at the beginning of June. There are fewer June letters than there are the other months surrounding them, and so he really must have taken some time off. His wife Catherine, also had a miscarriage, so things were not going, swimmingly in the household. And Dickens, as usual, just jumps back right into his writing world, both feet fully on. He's got to get right back to Oliver Twist. He's got to finish Pickwick Papers and do all the other work that he's doing too. And one of the things that he finds out about his previous sketches by Bose work, which had been published, these sketches had been in various, periodicals, and then they were collected by the publisher John McCrone and published as a book. And that book had just come out like as soon as Pickwick started in 1836. The sketches by Bose had come out, and then they had another series come out of them, and I might not see a whole nother book come out they called the second series with different sketches. Dickens writes a letter, James, to Forster. I don't have the date here, but it's in June. Earlier in June in 1837, my dear and John Forster has they are starting to become very close friends. This is so it was at the end of last year where they really met and started to become friends, and Forster will become his closest kind of, confident as far as his writing goes for the rest of his life. My dear Forster, I heard half an hour ago on authority which leaves me in no doubt about the matter, from the binder of Pickwick, in fact, that Macrone intends publishing a new issue of my sketches in monthly parts of nearly the same size and in just the same form as the Pickwick Papers. I need not tell you that this is calculated to injure me most seriously, or that I have a very natural and most decided objection to being supposed to presume upon the success of Pickwick, and thus foist this old work upon the public in its new dress for the mere purpose of putting money in my own pocket. I find that interesting, James, that Dickens is really concerned with people thinking he's trying to make a buck on his writing. He does nothing but try to make a buck on his writing all the time. But the image of it makes him look, I guess he feels makes him look cheap, or not quite so illustrious as he wants to be.
But you still have a lot of authors during this period who want to be styled as gentlemen,
Yeah,
and above mere mercenary concerns.
yeah.
Thackeray, I think, is sort of one of them. And so we're not yet in a society where it's okay to be a writer who just writes to make money.
Yeah. And for both Dickens and Thackeray, the way to become respectable is not to write serial comic fiction. Thackeray will do it with Vanity Fair, mirrored very much like, Dickens and his Pickwick and his others, that the monthly, and he just has yellow papers, but it's illustration on the cover that never changes, and he'll do the same thing. This letter continues. Neither need I say that the fact of my name being before the town, attached to 3 publications at the same time, must prove seriously prejudicial to my reputation. Pickwick Papers, Bentley's Magazine, and Oliver Twist going in there, and now, and then it'll be Sketches by Bowes. Dickens seems to feel that it's going to be overkill and that it's going to hurt his reputation to have too much on the market. He writes, I feel it necessary to add, not as a hasty threat, but as a deliberate and well-considered determination, that if this new issue does appear, I shall advertise in all the newspapers that it does so, not only without my sanction, but in opposition to my express request. Like, if he puts it out, I'm going to tell everybody I didn't want him to, and in effect, don't buy it. But I'm not seeing a cent off it either. So, which is what I'm getting at. I think at the end, Dickens realized, wait a minute, I'm not going to get paid for this. You're just putting it out while I'm trying to be successful and make money off of these other things that can't help him in his, career. Well, he asks Forster to go to Macrone and tell him that Chapman and Hall, who has who's doing the Pickwick Papers, Dickens' publisher now, and that he tells Macrone to tell them that Chapman and Hall is willing to buy the copyright. And it works. It works immediately. It's a matter of days. And Macrone's like, okay, yeah, like Macrone was did Macrone know that Dickens was going to offer to buy the copyright right off the bat? I mean, maybe. It seems like a good business play. Like, I'm going to publish these. Oh, you want to buy it back? Okay. So he sells to Chapman and Hall the copyright for both series of sketches for £2,000. And Chapman and Hall also, and together with the remaining stock, and it's 100 copies of the first series, 700 of the second. More on that when we look at the Pickwick Advertiser. And then Cruikshank's 28 copper plates. See, Cruikshank had illustrated the sketches for the book edition that had come out, and so Chapman and Hall were smart enough to also get off Cruikshank's plates for another £250. So $22.50 Chapman and Hall paid for it, knowing full well that Dickens is their cash cow. And they've just given Dickens a lot of money. They just gave him all the rest of the money for the rest of the run. And they said, if it winds up being more at the end, we'll give you more. If less, don't worry about it. So they are fully supporting him financially. When this comes out, this edition, I'm sorry, not that edition, but when the serial comes out, the Pickwick advertiser is getting really big. It increases in pages over the course of the run, and I really wanted to look at some of the advertisements in this issue. So let me just share the screen. And there we go, James. The issue number 15. Remember, these are the University of Victoria in Toronto. Their issues. That's the issues that we're sharing the images of. We don't have ours digitized at the Rosenbach. And you can see right here, they even have a stamp down here, Victoria College Library. But as soon as you go in, the back cover of the issue has just published, priced 1 shilling each, parts 1 and 2, containing 8 engravings on steel of Samuel Weller's illustrations of the Pickwick Club. I love this, James, in that they're illustrations. They say completed in 10 parts. So again, you'll get you buy them every month. Then you'll have extra illustrations. We already saw this in the last time we did a serial issue in number 14, when Alfred Crowquill's Pictures Picked from Pickwick Papers came out. This is an entirely new thing. And what I find fascinating, James, is Chapman and Hall and Dickens, they don't see a cent from this, and they're fine with letting it, be advertised. Like, they're willing to take the money to advertise it as well.
Yeah, intellectual property just existed in a very different world.
It did.
In the Victorian era. Just like Dickens did not see any money from the various stage adaptations. And he had a mixed feelings about a lot of these stage adaptations. But I think the general thought was that if somebody else is doing your story in another form, it's only going to help you as long as it's done well.
Yeah.
And so people will see these illustrations and then they'll go and they'll buy Pickwick Papers. People will see a stage adaptation and then they'll read the book. And I know when Mary Shelley's novel Frankenstein was being adapted to the stage for the first time, we have a letter from her father, who was also a novelist. And Godwin wrote to her saying, well, just hope that it does well, because if it does, you're going to sell a lot more books.
Yeah.
And she didn't make any money off of the stage adaptation, Presumption, which, had all sorts of people coming to see it, made all sorts of money. She didn't see any of that money, but it did mean more people went out and bought her book.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is, I mean, it's the fame. I love the fact too that it's Sam Weller's illustrations, in that this whole Pickwick mania that is happening, it's like the characters are now crossing over into.
Well, clearly, Sam Weller is a real person. He's not a fictional character. He exists. He's real. And he even did illustrations, so he must be a real person.
They the artist that did these, his name is Thomas Onwin, Onwhyn, Onwin. He was an English artist, illustrator, engraver, satirist, and when he was all finished, he did 32 illustrations of the Pickwick Papers, in these 10 monthly parts. And then he did another little series that were actually published in a book later, in an edition of Pickwick a little bit later. I will put in the chat here a link that you can see all of his illustrations. at the victorianweb.org. There's a link to all the illustrations that he did. And it was the first was that actually already come out in March, and then it was May, June, July, always at the very end of the month, just like when Pickwick Papers is released at the end of the month. These Samuel illustrations come out on May 31, June 30, July 31, August 31, September 30. So I don't know. These are probably all the last weekday of the month is probably what they are. And let me stop here and let me show you what they looked like. This is kind of like a frontispiece in a sense that came out with the first one. And I love how it is there he is, illustrations. Like instead of saying Pickwick, they show the picture of him because it's illustrated, right? Like that kind of joke. And the characters are just Owen redoing Fizz. I mean, that's what he's doing here. He's recreating what Fizz has already done, so people can enjoy even more of them. There's lots of little devices all around this too. These kind of comic gargoyle faces. I think these are perhaps scenes, but it's like almost impossible to tell what they would be from this. But I love the crest of arms here.
Yes.
Is the hat and the glasses, the boots, the Pickwick coat of arms.
And the scenes directly to the side of it appear to be the scenes on the cover of the Pickwick Papers when it came out in monthly installments. We've got the shooting
Here's a
scene.
shooting. Here's a shooting.
And then
and then here's the fit in the boat.
Fishing.
Yeah, they're at the bottom of the covers.
Yeah.
Here's Sam looking, nice and, with the old thumb up to like, hey, there's the governor. The fat boy, of course, fast asleep. And the rest of the characters. Here is one of the scenes. This is when Pickwick was caught in the closet in the boarding school that Jingle had tricked him to go into, and then he locked himself in the closet, and Wardle and Sam have come to save him, and I forget which of the other Pickwickians have come to save him here. And I don't know why Sam's ready to fight here with the women. I don't quite remember him ready to punch anybody. But he's here to rescue Mr. Pickwick from this situation. And I think I have one more. Yeah. Oh, this one I love. Because it redoes something that I wish there were more illustrations of. But it is from the Goblins Who Stole a Sexton scene. And what Owen has done here this is after Gabriel Grubb has been taken down into the earth, into the Goblins' lair, and they're showing him the pictures of the family.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, do I love all of his little goblins surrounding this. I like the seat that the goblin is sitting on is a face. It was looking up at Gabriel Grubb too, like it's alive. All their little gargoyle faces. There's a big frog. This guy's got wings. He's more like an insect. It
also shows us the image, which is sort of like a magic lantern type image that then he can watch.
Yeah. So this one I really enjoy. So, and look, he's even signed it, Sam Weller. And I think some of the illustrations are signed Sam Weller and some are signed his own name. I can't remember which. I haven't gone through them all to see which, but but some of them are definitely signed Sam Weller. So that is the Sam Weller illustrations to Pickwick that you can buy and add them to your collection. I'm gonna bring up the Pickwick Advertiser again. And at the end, and some people did this, as they did with Crow Quill's illustrations, as they would do with these Unwin illustrations, when they had all the serial parts and they put them together and had them bound, they included the fizz and the other illustrations. And you can find, in collections and places, people that had bound everything up in one book. At the foot of this page, we could just see, although it has the Victoria College Library stamp on it, you could still make it out. It is EJ has just published a very fine portrait of His late Majesty William IV in his coronation robe. So to commemorate the king who has just died, we will sell some pictures of him for when he was first, crowned. I was thinking coronated. What's the word? No, it's crowned. Coronated is a good verb though for it. They and the rest of the Pickwick Advertiser books, we'll get a lot of books. 20,000 of the advertising sheet will be printed and stitched in each monthly number, and they're printing a lot more than 20,000 by this point. I forget the exact numbers. We might be up to they're running off 26,000 to start by this point, or it could even be more than that. And by the end, it'll be closer to 40,000, I think, by the end. And then when they get reprinted and when they have to run further printings, they don't also add the advertising into that. It's, first of all, you haven't paid for it. And second of all, it's just more costs to add to future printings of these. So that's why a lot of editions will wind up not having the Pickwick Advertiser in it, because they weren't the very first printings of it. But lots of books on etiquette here. Here's a spelling book. We'll go through this a little quicker. And I want to stop on a couple. Just books. Of course, books are going to be advertised in Pickwick. But look at this right here. New music, the original Pickwick quadrilles.
I have not heard the Pickwick quadrilles. I have, however, heard the David Copperfield polkas and the Christmas Carol quadrilles. But this became a thing. Whenever there's a new Dickens book out, everyone wants to take advantage of it to sell sheet music, to sell whatever.
This is the start, and it even says by Bose. It's not by Dickens, clearly. Although it's not like he can't do music and write lyrics, but that's not really what he can do. They were published. I will share their images as well. This is the here, and this is what it looked like. It's literally just like this. It's sheet music. Samuel Pickwick, Esquire, and they've even got his, chairman, member Pickwick Club, up here. But they're these quadrilles, which are, if some of you don't know, it's a quadrille is a dance, and this is
For
music
four couples.
For four couples in a kind of a rectangle. It winds up being almost like a square dance in a sense. Yeah. And this is the music written to be played to accompany that kind of dance. And there were, as we saw in the issue, there were quadrilles containing Pickwick, Winkle, Tupman, Snodgrass, Jingle, and Sam Weller. So different dances for each of them. But in this, and this is actually here, the sheet music here that I'm showing was a Philadelphia printing of it. That came out the following year. Pickwick merchandise still continues to sell for years and will be recycled over and over and pirated in places like America. Here is a later cover of someone else doing the Pickwick quadrille. And this was actually in a performance in which different actors portrayed Pickwick, Weller. Here's Job Trotter, the Fat Boy Jingle, and Miss Rachel Wardle, and they would do dances for their characters. but it was still called the Pickwick Quadrille. This is different than what is being advertised in here, but I like the idea that this idea just continues. And this is like, I think this might be as late as 1871. I can't remember how late this is, but it's much later. It's at least a couple decades later from the original Pickwick quadrilles. And note that it's different characters too. They're not just doing the original characters, that the original Pickwickians. The fat boy is so popular. You have to have him dance, and it must have been a comic dance too, with some very fat or stuffed clothing actor doing it. And of course they have to have an actress here do one of them. But they're the Pickwick quadrilles. Now, what's next in the...
Well, there's a lot of medicine that is being advertised, and I love how they're constantly saying, beware of the counterfeit snake oil. You want the genuine snake oil I'm selling.
Yes. There's also this odd queer fish society. Did you notice this?
Yeah, it sounds like the Pickwick Club.
It is exactly what the Pickwick Club is. And it was never finished, but it was monthly parts of this story of these men in this organization that argued over things. Then they told stories about their adventures. And there were illustrations with every issue. It was later published in a book, but just what they had already done in a book. And you can find that book on Google. And it's not very funny. It is so imitative that it winds up not being original and funny at all. The Hippodrome, where people will go and see, horses doing all kinds of tricks and racing around. Here's also still in here is Crow Quill's pictures picked from the Pickwick Papers that we looked at a couple episodes ago. And here's the John Armstrong's liver pills, you're talking about, like, everything is, and it's all snake oil. It's,
But they're very, very adamant. You've got to get my snake oil because beware of imitations.
And up the top here, we have Victoria, Queen of England, the new national song written in commemoration of Her Majesty's accession to the throne of England. Music composed expressly for the occasion by John Barnett. That's not the composer that Dickens worked with on. I don't think it is, but the name looks familiar to me. I'll have to look that up. But new queen, she needs a new song. Anything to make a buck. Macaroni and vermicelli, the real macaroni and vermicelli this company is selling. Don't be fooled by imitations.
Oh, but this is the British macaroni.
Yes.
This is interesting because right on the other side, it talks about the French wool mattresses, and you want the genuine French mattresses because they're using long-haired wool as opposed to that shoddy, short-haired wool they use here in Britain. And so something that's from France, it's fancy, and thus it should be more expensive, and you want the French stuff. But the macaroni advertisement is like, you don't want the macaroni from Italy. It's dirty. It's filthy. We're so much more cleanly here in England than those Italians. And so it's interesting to me how in some cases something being foreign is being billed as, oh, it's a luxury item. This is something that you really want. And in other cases, oh no, you don't want that foreign stuff. You want the good British stuff. You can trust British macaroni. Don't get it from Italy.
I love that. Toothaches cured, Morrison's pills. I mean, it's just fascinating to go through these advertisements and look at these. I like Bet's patent brandy in preference to cognac. And this isn't an advertisement to go buy brandy to drink and enjoy. It's all medicinal. It's pure and wholesome spirit used in our public hospitals, recommended by the faculty in the most delicate medical cases. It's good for, it will not, like French brandy, produce constipation, headache, nausea, and other injurious effects. It is, but the flavor is similar, but it's really good for you.
Mhm.
Yes, send the brandy, stout ale, and cider down here. I like this ad up here, and this is a personal favorite of mine, but I'll tell you why. The British Consul's Office, Philadelphia. I love that.
Ah,
Know all persons to whom these presents shall come, that I, Gilbert Robertson, Esquire, His Britannic Majesty's Consul, do hereby certify that R. Wharton, Esquire, who attests to the efficacy of Old Ridge's Balm of Columbia in restoring hair, is mayor of this city, and that M. Randall, Esquire, is prothonotary of the Court of Common Pleas. It's a literal, what do you call it? It's like a notarized statement that from officials that this is good stuff, that this hair oil
yeah,
really works. And
absolutely. Bring your hair back. Totally.
it is but they like the connection that it comes from Philadelphia and an actual British consul. Now, of course, you would say, like, well, is that really the British consul? I can tell you this is the mayor of Philadelphia then, and M. Randall is the prothonotary. Is it Matt? I can't remember his first name. I looked it up, and he was the prothonotary. Randall then would become mayor, but he was the prothonotary of the Court of Common Pleas in Philadelphia. For those who don't know, the prothonotary is the chief clerk of the civil courts. Some places they're appointed, some places they're elected. In Philadelphia, they're elected by judges still. And I know this because my father was the prothonotary of Philadelphia for about 17
Oh,
years. So that was, and I grew up in City Hall going, down to my father's office and doing all that there. So, and in his office, they had portraits of all the prothonotaries at his time. I don't know how many it was, all around his office. And when he had the office, modernized and redesigned, all the portraits came down. Randall was probably up there. There's probably a portrait of Randall somewhere in storage rooms of City Hall. But there you go, a little Philadelphia connection to the Pickwick Advertiser. Here's a whole poem on tailoring, and I love that they had to turn it sideways to make it fit with all of the rest of the advertisements that they had going on. And I think that's the last, of course, Rowan's Macassar oil. And then the pictures would come, the 2 plates by Fizz. And then we have the address, and we're going to get to the address in just a minute. But first, even before the story, more books, but this time it's Chapman and Hall. So these aren't advertisements that they're paying to be in here. This is Chapman Hall, the publisher, putting out notices for their own books. And this first
promos,
yeah,
essentially.
and this first one is the Sketches of Young Ladies that Hablett Brown has illustrated, Fizz, and someone else has written. I don't know if this is also him but it's Quiz and Fizz, but I didn't look it up to see what it was. A book on wines. And then here we go. It says Chapman and Hall beg to announce that they have purchased the entire stock and copyright of the highly popular works by the author of the Pickwick Papers, Sketches by Boz. This is the stock they bought from Macron. Now they want to sell it to everybody. And what better way to advertise it in the issue of the people who are already reading Boz's works? And these are all the sketches. And you know how Dickens was complaining about that they're going to publish it. Macron's going to publish it in monthly numbers, and that's exactly what Chapman and Hall do at the end of the run of Pickwick. They start publishing while Oliver Twist is still running in Bentley's monthly. The Sketches by Boz will come out in monthly parts as issued by Chapman and Hall, looking exactly in the exact same format that Pickwick Papers is in. And they will do that. And I forget how many parts they wound up going through. I think it might have been 12 parts it took to do all of them. But you can quote me on that. I don't quite remember. But let's get back to this address. This came to everyone, and this kind of starts the issue. And this is Dickens uh, letting, and it's dated June 30th, which is the date that this was probably hit the newsstands or the book stalls and came out for the book dealers to be available to sell, June 30th, 1837. And the address is about the why they had the month off. The author is desirous to take the opportunity afforded him by the resumption of this work to state once again that what he thought had been stated sufficiently emphatically before, namely that its publication was interrupted by a severe domestic affliction of no ordinary kind. But that's apparently not what people were thinking. Various idle speculations and absurdities Dickens has heard and have pained him exceedingly. He says that he's heard that one of the reasons they stopped publishing was he was killed outright. Another that he was driven mad. He was imprisoned for debt. He was sent per steamer to the United States. And then he was rendered incapable of any mental exertion forevermore. And he says at the end of this, by all, in short, represented as doing anything but seeking in a few weeks' retirement the restoration of that cheerfulness and peace of which a sad bereavement has temporarily deprived him. People, I just needed to take a break because my sister died. That's really the truth. We weren't lying about that. And then I love this little notice at the end of this, James. We receive every month an immense number of communications purporting to be suggestions, in quotation marks, for the Pickwick Papers. We have no doubt that they are forwarded with the kindest intentions, but as it is wholly out of our power to make use of any such hints, and as we really have no time to peruse anonymous letters, we hope the writers will henceforth spare themselves a great deal of unnecessary and useless trouble. Stop sending me story ideas. I don't need them.
And stop speculating about my personal life.
Yes.
Both of these I think are coming out of Dickens's own success as a celebrity. Because he is a public figure now, everything he does is going to be grounds for speculation. And everybody wants to get close to it. Oh, here's my idea. Why don't you use this idea? I'm reminded of how when Anne Radcliffe stopped writing, there were rumors that she had been driven mad by her own stories. That after writing things like The Mysteries of Udolpho and The Italian and everything, she got so scared she was driven mad. And a similar thing is recounted here about the idea that Dickens has gone crazy or that he's been sent to the fleet for debt.
Or America. He's been
Yeah.
sent to America, but per steamer.
And all of these things feel like the type of thing that would happen in Pickwick Papers. Falling into debt, being sent off to America. We're gonna see some characters later on get sent off to the New World. Having severe mental distress, like we get in things like the Madman's Manuscript, and so we always want to project onto our authors the types of things that they write about, whether that's true or not.
Yeah. Well, he can now just get back to doing Pickwick Papers, and that's what we'll do the rest of the show. I did tell everyone when I sent the episode email that we were looking at some playbills from the Rosenbach's collections about Pickwick stage performances. And I'm sorry, James, because that's the kind of thing I'd love to talk with you about. But I'm going to save that until next month because I really wanted to take a nice in-depth look at several of the things in the Pickwick Advertiser this month. I'm pretty sure the rest of the issues that we have, I think the advertisements are with all of them. So now you'll always be able to see them just like the ones we share on the Pickwick Monthly webpage. So you'll always be able to see these advertisements just as the original, readers did. I mean, I have my facsimile edition that I got from Easton Press, which is I read one every month, and go through this. And then there's a whole set at the end here too. In the end, there's even, and it's in your the PDF that I sent. One of them's in yellow pages. They have a whole different color page that the John James Rippon's Furnishing Ironmongery Warehouses did a different color to really stand out in the advertising. And I like looking at that stuff, and it really gives you a feel for the period, for the time when everyone is reading these for the first time. So, all righty. Well, when last we met, James, when last the audience and I met, and I don't know, I can't remember which episode you were up, but when the Pickwick Papers was out, Sam and Mr. Pickwick helped Mr. Winkle reunite with his beloved Arabella without letting know that her brother Ben and Bob Sawyer know that they were reuniting. And then Pickwick returned to London, but was soon arrested because he still refuses to pay the damages that were awarded to Mrs. Bardell for the breach of marriage contract. And the last we saw of Mr. Pickwick, he's about to spend his first night in the Fleet prison. So I love in the chat that people are talking about the word prothonotary and, oh, what an unusual word. And like, I grew up with the word prothonotary. So like, that's not an unusual word. What are you talking about? So, but it is an unusual word. So, and I'm glad it shows up in an edition of Pickwick, even if it's just the advertisements. Well, Mr. Pickwick, Chapter 41, what befell Mr. Pickwick when he got into the Fleet, what prisoners he saw there, and how he passed the night. James begins with he's being shown around the places where he can sleep. He is, of course, shocked at the conditions of these places. What does he say right off the bat? Oh, looking down a dark and filthy staircase, which appeared to lead to a range of damp and gloomy stone vaults beneath the ground. And those, I suppose, are the little cellars where the prisoners keep their small quantities of coals. Unpleasant places to have to go down to, but very convenient, I dare say. Yes, I shouldn't wonder if they was convenient, replied the gentleman, seeing that a few people live there. Pretty snug. That's the fair, that is. They call that area the fair. And Mr. Pickwick is astonished that you don't mean to say people live there. Don't I? Why shouldn't I live down there? Yes, and die down there too very often. This is an awakening for Mr. Pickwick, that people will be put in these kinds of conditions to live. And we'll see that all through this issue. And it's we're at the point, James, where this isn't the funny issue this month. And I think it's no surprise that written partially right after Mary Hogarth has died, that Dickens isn't into the full hijinks, and we're finally, and it works. It's not like he didn't know that Mary was going to die when he got Pickwick to the prison, but that's the part we're at now, and it's a little bit more sobering than the rest of the Pickwick Papers system.
Yeah. This is what I often think of when I think of Dickens. Dickens, the social reformer, Dickens, the crusader who is wanting to bring attention to these serious problems in society, and that phrase that you just read, live down there, yes, and die down there too. That could come out of Bleak House.
Yeah.
It feels like a much more mature Dickens than a lot of this goofy comical stuff that we've been having.
Or Little Dorrit, which you just read with your Dickens group, and that that about the Marshalsea, which was the actual prison that Dickens's family was in, and I think, and this is the first It's actually not the first shot because you get a little bit in Sketches by Boz. Dickens writes
Mhm.
about prisons, but there I think it's Newgate. I can't remember what
He
prison.
does write about
Yeah.
Newgate,
Um,
which is a criminal prison as
yeah.
opposed to a debtor's prison. Uh, it's interesting that having actually spent time, or at least his family spent time, in the Marshalsea, and Dickens would have spent time in there, even though he was living with somebody else at the time that his father was in
Yeah.
prison there. He chooses the Fleet.
Yeah.
He's going to do a different one.
Yeah.
Uh, Later on, when he writes Little Dorrit, he goes back to the very one in which he had that
Yeah.
personal experience, but maybe it was a little too close to him at this point.
Yeah, at this age, is that what you think? I'm thinking he can't quite deal with it yet. It's
Yeah,
kind of shame from his youth when his father is in prison for debt, and just like we'll see in this chapter, the whole family comes, and it was his Dickens's father and mother,
hmm,
and then the four youngest kids all go to the Marshalsea and live with him in not particularly, savory conditions. Um, and Fanny doesn't go. She's Dickens's older sister, and she's the oldest child. She might be living at the music school then, or living
she
with her
was,
family while she's taking music lessons.
yeah, and she won a medal at the music school. She was the hope of the family.
Yeah,
She was the one who had talent. And so the Dickenses were investing in that talent because if anyone was going to be saving the family, it was going to be Fan.
yeah.
And Charles are like, oh, he's useless. Just put him to work in the
It's
blacking
interesting that
factory.
they don't have him live with them though. That they literally he needs to pay for a place to live
Yep.
and work, and they could have had him stay with them there, and then they would have gotten more money. They wouldn't have to pay for his accommodations somewhere else, which would have been more expensive than his accommodations in the prison. Um, for me, it must be the idea that they need him to learn how to become independent as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So at 12, he has to go off and live with somebody. And then I can't remember if it was in the morning or at night where he has to walk all the way to the Marshalsea. And it was apparently not that close to where he was living
Yeah.
and then to his job. But at one point he would have to go to the Marshalsea every day to have a meal with the family.
Mm.
Um, and we'll see him finally coming to, bring some of this out. No one in his life knows this. Um, I, we don't know. Maybe Kate doesn't even know it, his wife.
He eventually told Forrester.
Forster's the one he tells, but that's even much later. We're
Yeah.
talking like, a couple decades from now, he finally tells somebody about this experience, not just the Marshalsea prison. Now, I'm sure people that knew the family knew it. So it's not that secret, but but his experience, his shame at working in the blacking factory, this is all secret stuff to him that he feels ashamed of. And this is, I think, some of the things when he writes, it's a way for him to help deal with that.
And when this all came out after he died, his own wife and children were shocked. You would think, maybe you would share this with your spouse, maybe with your eldest child or something like that. But none of them had any clue.
Yep.
That's how secret he kept it.
Back to the story, Roker is still showing him around, and they have names for every place. This is the coffee room flight,
Mhm.
and he's going to sleep in the warden's room tonight. And what a room he is. He's like there, holding the door open, looking triumphantly around. There's a room, and it's just not the nice room. You wouldn't think to find such a room as this in the Farringdon Hotel, would you? Yeah, you'd find a better room in a hotel, I'm sure. Rusty old bedstead, and then he's like, "That's a sleeper right there. You'll fall asleep as soon as you hit that. Because what, you'll get knocked out hitting your head on the rusty bars. I don't know." Uh, Sam sees, Sam's funny here. He says, "Sam, I should think," said Sam, eyeing the piece of furniture in question with a look of excessive disgust. "I should think Poppy's was nothing to it." I love Sam's sarcasm here. Roker says that uh well, he asked about the gentleman in the place. I suppose the other gentleman who sleeps here are gentlemen. I think Sam's asking the questions, right? Mr. Pickwick's just like, wow, well, what am I think lost a little bit, and Sam has to ask practical questions. Of course, there are other gentlemen staying in the place that Mr. Pickwick was. One of them, such a gentleman, he takes his 12 pints of ale a day. And leaves off smoking even at his meals. Never leaves off smoking even at his meals. Well, that's a gentleman, right? He must be a first rater, said Sam. A1, replied Mr. Roker. A1. I didn't know this, James. Do you know where A1 comes from?
I assume it doesn't come from the steak sauce.
The late it does not. You're mentioning it. I like A1 steak sauce. A1 is actually, it's a new expression for Sam or Broker or Pickwick and these people. It actually comes from the towards the after the midpoint of the 18th century. It's from Lloyd's insurance company, and it's a rating of a ship in their insurance
Ah.
things. And there were certain ships would be rated A1, meaning that everything is correct and sail can sail well, and so A1 is the good rating for the ships. And actually, the first in the OED, the first use of it that the old Oxford English Dictionary has, meaning this beyond that related to ships, just in general for something to be well regarded, is Pickwick Papers. So this is the earliest reference we can have just of somebody saying A1 about something else or someone else. One of the in the last or two episodes ago in number 14, James, we were looking all the OED quotations, because I had to look up a couple things and I'm like, oh look, and they're using Pickwick, the actual word I was looking up. And then I discovered 974 Pickwick references in the Oxford English Dictionary. It is a well-used book to illustrate the English language. And this A1 quote is in there. So, all righty. Mr. Pickwick decides, well, he just better go to sleep. He smilingly announced, excuse me, his determination to test the powers of the narcotic bedstead for that night. In spite of the dismal surroundings, Dickens's narrator is still giving that light touch for the reader to get through all of this. First he walks around and to take a look at the place. He sees, all these big hulking men smoking tobacco and drinking beer and playing cards. He also sees some solitary tenant might be seen poring by the light of a feeble tallow candle over a bundle of soiled and tattered papers, yellowed with dust and dropping to pieces from age, writing for the 100th time some lengthened statement of his grievances for the perusal of some great man whose eyes it would never reach or whose heart it would never touch. So now we're finally getting into the things that Dickens wants to expose about this place and the conditions people are put into. And then in a third, a man with his wife and a whole crowd of children, maybe like the Dickens family, might be seen making up a scanty bed on the ground or upon a few chairs for the younger ones to pass the night in. This is the conditions of these, debtors' prisons at the time.
And yet Dickens doesn't romanticize the poor and saying, oh, all of the people who are in this prison are completely innocent. In fact, we are shown quite a number of scoundrels.
Yeah.
But the thing is, for the scoundrels, this is hardly a prison at all. They just keep on living their scoundrelly lifestyle. It's only punishing the people who are the virtuous.
because it's unequal. Says, right? He says, like Pickwick's like, well, these guys are just drinking and smoking and having a good time. And Sam's like, yeah, that's what they would have done anyway, sure. But Sam says this, it's unequal, as my father used to say, when his grog won't make half and half. It's unequal, and that's the fault on it. So a Wellerism we get. Um, it's, some people are, have to pay the price and it's no good. And some people, have no problem being there. They were just going to be smoking, drinking, and playing cards outside anyway. And not living in nice conditions anyway. So it's unequal. And Miss Pickwick right away says, what does he say? He says, I think you're right, Sam, said Mr. Pickwick after a few moments reflection. Quite right. I we there's no doubt that Mr. Pickwick learns from his, his servant, his boots servant that he has brought into his life. That he's the one showing Mr. Pickwick, views of the world that he doesn't understand. He is his Jeeves, right? Well, now Sam tells the story of somebody that he knew that was in a debtor's prison. Someone by the name of Number Teventi. Instead of 20, it's Teventi. You have to throw that V in there in place of the W. Someone imprisoned for 17 years just because at first he had a £9 something debt and then costs, and then winds up in prison, can never pay it. Costs accumulate over time. He's got to pay for his own living in there, winds up in prison for 17 years. And one day he's like, hey, I'd like to go out and see the outside. Will you guys let me do that? I mean, I've been in here so long. They know him so well. They trust him. They're like, sure, go out. Comes running back like, oh my God, it's so awful out there. But he decides he wants to go out and have a beer. So they say like, sure, go out and have a beer. And he does. And he's great. And he's drinking. And he comes back a little late. And they were like, oh, we almost locked you out. And he was like, what? I'm never going out again. And can't live in the world after being so long in the prison. And that's not an unusual thing for people that have done long prison sentences. That's the same condition that happens to prisoners today. When you've been in some kind of regimented, confined prison for decades, being outside of that can be too disorienting. For
this is what listeners. Dickens will explore with Dr. Manette in Tale of Two Cities.
Tale of Two Cities, yeah.
Because he was in that situation, imprisoned for years in solitary.
Yeah.
Which is even worse. And much of that book is exploring the psychology of somebody who has been imprisoned and then released, and being unable to adjust to it.
And many of the ideas and the development of those ideas he got from visiting Philadelphia, going to Eastern State Penitentiary. And you can find some real close parallels in the things that he writes about his visit to the solitary confined patients in Eastern State and some of the passages in Tale of Two Cities. And he remembers this very well. And I don't know, it's 10 years later, in between time, a little less than that when he writes Tale of Two Cities. But that's the real the experience that Dickens has had, seeing these people imprisoned in solitary cells for many years. So he is fascinated by prisons.
Yeah.
Dickens, it's something that is always on his mind, is the how prisons operate and the conditions and what it does to people.
Now, if you were in the fleet, you were like this Number Teventi, able to go outside as long as you stayed within a certain area that was known as the rules.
Yeah.
And the rules gets referenced in this installment that refers to an area around the prison. I don't think it was terribly large, but you could go a couple of blocks, and as long as you were still within the rules, you hadn't broken any of the regulations of the Fleet Street prison.
Such a strange system, right? That, and you think that like they could have a system where they could say, yeah, you can go out for a little while, just make sure you come back. Because in the society, what are you going to do? Like, where are you going to go? Like, if you're already stuck in the position that you're stuck here, you have no opportunity to really go elsewhere to, make a living, right? I mean, you're going to get caught in a sense. And yeah, it's a very weird system. The whole
Well,
debtor's prison thing. In America, and then it was, I think, still going on. It was just ending in America, and it'll end in England too,
yeah.
within a couple decades. But just to think that, people would be in prison for debt is just insanity. Especially because it doesn't even make logical sense. And how are you going to pay off your debt if you're in prison? I mean, it just doesn't even make sense.
Well, it's a way to force your friends and family to cough up the money. And as much as we look down on it today, there are cases of state and local authorities in the United States locking people up for things like, oh, you didn't pay your child support,
Yeah,
and until you pay your child support, you're going to be locked up. And a lot of times, maybe the person is just kind of a scoundrel and just didn't want to pay child support. And once you arrest them, they'll be like, okay, I'll find the money.
yeah,
But a lot of times that's not the case, and the person just stays locked up for quite some time.
yeah. And there are judgments too. Like if there's
Yeah,
a legal judgment against you, you have to pay it or you have to serve time. So,
yeah.
but it doesn't help the kids, that's for sure. Well, um, Sam leaves. Sam has to go out, withdraw for the night. Mr. Pickwick tells him go sleep in some public house. Don't stay here. And Mr. Pickwick goes to first it's another just reminder of where he is. He was alone in the coarse, vulgar crowd and felt the depression of spirits and sinking of heart naturally consequent on the reflection that he was cooped and caged up without a prospect of liberation.
Hmm.
As to the idea of releasing himself by ministering to the sharpness of Dodson and Fogg, it never for an instant entered his thoughts. So he's not, he still doesn't regret being there, but he's clearly affected by being there. And even though he's surrounded by all these people, he's alone. And I think there's something a little, classist in that as well, and that he's alone because he can't really relate to these kinds of to the people he's there with. Um, and he is actually a gentleman. And I'm sure there are other gentlemen there, meaning men who just don't have a visible means of support. They just live on their, income without working. Um, or at least they were that way until they got too far in debt. But uh, Mr. Pickwick is really feeling it, and then he's just seeing everybody there, and then he sees a young woman with a child in her arms who seemed scarcely able to crawl from emaciation and misery, was walking up and down the passage in conversation with her husband, who had no other place to see her in. Mr. Pickwick's heart was really too full to bear it, and he went upstairs to bed. It's reminiscent of this one of the interpolated tales. The one where the guy gets revenge against
Hmm.
the father-in-law who put himself and his wife through everything, and how she comes to visit. I mean, we had this earlier in Pickwick Papers. Everybody, that's the one of the tales told, and the wife and child die because he can't support them. And here we have Mr. Pickwick actually seeing this. This isn't just a tale now. He's now seeing these people. Well, he goes to sleep, and then we get what it normally would be a funny scene. It winds up not being funny in a sense. Like it's light, but it's still not. Like this whole frivolity thing is just really strange in prison. Um, and he's woken up by people in his room, the people he's rooming with in the warden's room, uh, drinking, dancing. A man in a broad-skirted green coat with corduroy knee smalls and gray cotton stockings was performing the most popular steps of a hornpipe. And they're all drunk and singing. Um, there's another tall fellow with an olive complexion, long dark hair, and very thick, bushy whiskers meeting under his chin. He's wearing an 18-penny French skull cap with a gaudy tassel. And it says there was a rakish vagabond smartness and a kind of boastful rascality about the whole man that was worth a mine of gold. Let's look at the picture from Fizz for this. And here they are. And Pickwick has been woken from slumber. Here's and his Smangle is his name, we find out. And I think it's Mivens, right? Is the dancer. And then there's another one in bed with him who's drunk or he's in bed, is drunk and is singing along. And then there's this poor guy over here, just like in misery. And this is what Dickens is trying to convey here, right? That some of these people they're just like drunks and no good anyway, and they're just doing their time here. And then there's other people like this guy who are just, he doesn't want to be there. And he would do what he could to get out of there, but now he's stuck. And not only is he stuck in prison, but he's stuck with these guys.
Yeah.
Here's the rules on the wall. The rules of the Fleet Prison, what you could do and what you couldn't do. And the
I like the composition of having the clothes hanging up near the ceiling there.
Yeah.
It just adds balance to the illustration, but it also reminds you that, they don't have a lot of furniture. They don't have a lot of space. So yeah, we're just going to hang some of our clothes from this line up near the ceiling.
Well, Pickwick is woken by these revelers. What does it say? We get what does it say about this guy? We'll have it in a little bit as they're all dancing, and well, we'll get to it. But they wake him up, and then they just think it's fun to wake him up. The gentleman is awake. Shakespeare, how do you do, sir? How is Mary and Sarah, sir, and the dear old lady at home, sir? And then they snatch his nightcap off and puts it on somebody else's head. And that's like, no, Mr. Pickwick's not standing for that. He taking a man's nightcap from his brow by violent means and adjusting it on the head of an unknown gentleman of dirty exterior, however ingenious a witticism in itself, is unquestionably one of those which come under the denomination of practical jokes. And Mr. Pickwick is not going to suffer a practical joke. And he struck the Zephyr so smart a blow in the chest as to deprive him of a considerable portion of the commodity which sometimes bears his name. And then, recapturing his nightcap, puts it back on his head, and he's good. So, like, I love that metaphor there, that he's been called, Smangle's been calling him Zephyr, and he hits him, and that's the Zephyr, the air, the wind. That's what Pickwick knocks out of him.
Yeah, it's an interesting way of saying had the wind knocked out of him.
But then they're nice, and then they're like, whoa, settle down, you're a trump. I like you all the better for it. And now get back in bed so you don't get, suffer the rheumatics. And And then the gentleman with the whiskers, Smangles, gives a "allow me the honor," said the gentleman with the whiskers, presenting his dexter hand and aspirating the H. Uh, the dexter hand, everyone, is your right. That the left, James, is the
Sinister.
sinister. Dexter and sinister. Um, they and then it's all there. This is the initiation scene, right? Of Mr. Pickwick. He's alone in the prison, and these prisoners are initiating him into the life that goes on here, in which somebody's got to buy the beer and the cigars, or the booze and the cigars, and it's going to be his turn, Mr. Pickwick's turn tonight. And not in a threatening manner either. It's just, these guys are, luckily Mr. Pickwick didn't get, have to room this night with some particularly, dangerous criminals. These guys are just there to have fun. They're trying to have fun is what they're trying to do.
It reminds me though of the way Steerforth cons money out of David and David Copperfield, where he's like, "Well, I'm sure you'd like some of this, right? If you wanted to treat the room with some of this, you could if you wanted to." Uh, and poor David doesn't even realize that he's being conned out of his money. And I kind of feel like a similar thing is happening to Pickwick, where it's like, "Oh, okay, here's what you do. You ask for the change in cigars. That way you know he won't steal the change if you ask for the change in cigars. And then don't worry about the cigars. I'll smoke them." Uh, and Pickwick appears to go along with this without
He's accepting
any
it. Yeah.
pushback.
I mean, he never pushes back on anything that is kind of generous to others, is what it seems throughout these adventures. So he's okay with it here. But what he doesn't stand for is, you're not allowed to snatch his cap off. He's going to punch you for that. And even then, he like jumps right out of bed and he puts up the dukes, like, I'll take you all on. And they're like, yes, we like that. And then they turn it around and make it camaraderie with him, and then propose the sherry and the of course the cigars. So, well, they get those, and then that's the rest of the night. They drink and smoke, and Mr. Pickwick has to stay up real late with them. It doesn't seem like he's doing any of that. He's not drinking, he's not smoking. They're doing that, singing the songs. He finally gets to bed and goes to sleep. Smangle here is kind of like a lesser Jingle, he's definitely that same kind of, I'm gonna con what I can get out of people, but he's not brilliant like Jingle, and who can run a real game. And and we will soon have Jingle.
Yeah.
So it's just like this almost entryway for the reader into like remembering this kind of character. This is the one that's not very successful. Now we'll see the one who was successful, but now has finally had his comeuppance.
Yeah.
Chapter 42. Illustrative, like the preceding one, of the old proverb that adversity brings a man acquainted with strange bedfellows, likewise containing Mr. Pickwick's extraordinary and startling announcement to Mr. Samuel Weller. Mr. Pickwick wakes up in the morning, and there's Sam waiting for him, sitting on the portmanteau, reliable Sam already. Smangle is really upset that this servant is in the room, doesn't know who he is, who the devil is this fellow, and Sam's not gonna have anybody, mess with his own, equilibrium, or his, him taking care of Mr. Pickwick. And then Smangle's trying to have things done for him, and somebody else pay. Oh, take your linen to the washerwoman's. Do you want me to help you with that? You can put it in with my stuff. Of course, Mr. Pickwick would wind up having to pay for it all. Sam realizes. Go ahead.
I was just going to say he seems to be learning, right? Because yeah, Sam is there to protect him now. It's like, no, 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 that's okay.
Yeah, now Sam's
You
there.
send yours.
Yeah, now Sam needs to, Sam's the one that can help Mr. Pickwick get past all these people. I mean, if Sam's not there, does Mr. Pickwick just give him the stuff, and
Quite
go along with
possibly.
that? How about something to brush? And this is where Sam's finally like, you know what? Perhaps if one of us was to brush without troubling the man, it'd be more agreeable for all parties, as the schoolmaster said when the young gentleman objected to being flogged by the butler. Um,
An odd Wellerism there.
yes, very without troubling the man, it'd be more agreeable for all parties as the man was being flogged. I'm not even 100% sure.
As the schoolmaster said, then the young fellow objected to being flogged by the butler. So the student should be flogged by the schoolmaster and is instead being flogged by the butler. And so the student's like, well, this doesn't seem right. I'm supposed to be beaten by you, not by him. But the schoolmaster says, well, this is more agreeable for all parties. I don't know. Maybe
There you go. Thank you.
the
Yeah.
butler's a bit of a sadist.
I couldn't get
Uh,
my head around that one. Um, well, Smangle has his breakfast of cigars. Uh,
Breakfast of Champions.
yeah, there you go. Well, I have my breakfast every day is a pipe and coffee. So that's literally what I have every single morning, pipe and coffee, and then I move on to. I don't eat until like 11 or so. So yeah. All righty. Nothing wrong with that. Beer would be good too. Small beer, as they used to have. I would have that if I could, if I could get away with it. Um, they breakfast after breakfasting in a small closet attached to the coffee room, which bore the imposing title of the Snuggery. I love that. The Snuggery is what they call that. And apparently, because I was like, wait, I've heard it in this novel already. A snuggery is actually usually a cozy room in a bar. And
Mhm.
Dickens has already used it that way in this book. There's a snuggery in one of the bars that they're in, the pubs that they're in earlier in the novel, and then it'll be used again later. Might even be at the Marquis of Granby's, the that Weller's widow owns. Um,
Shows up in Little Dorrit as well in the Marshalsea. The
does it?
Marshalsea also has a snuggery.
There you go. And
So
it's a parodic term here for the
yeah,
prison. It's just like there's also a coffee room. It's not really a coffee room. It's just a room in your prison that
yeah.
people are doing that kind of thing in. And this is the snuggery here. But I like a snuggery. So I'm gonna start calling a place in my house the snuggery. Um, and now Pickwick is given his chummage ticket, which sounds really gross. Like chummage, what? Because I automatically think of like the chum, like the fish entrails thing
Yeah.
they throw to attract sharks and jaws, the chum, but or the chum bucket in SpongeBob, that
Mm.
Plankton, has. Um, but but it actually is more that chum for that we now use for the term friends.
Mhm.
Uh, Chum originally meant someone you share rooms with. Um, and now it's come to mean friend. It was probably derived as an abbreviation of chambermate or chamber fellow, and it kind of became chum. I didn't know that. And that's what it used to mean. A chum was just somebody you shared a room with. Didn't necessarily mean you were friends with them. Clearly,
Mm.
they're not going to be friends with him here. And so that's the chummage ticket. And he's got number 27 on the third floor, I guess that is, with a parson, a butcher, and somebody else. Oh, the horse chanter. But he's a leg now. A lot of slang, everybody. A horse chanter is someone who kind of puffs horses, who says great things about horses in order to raise the price for their value in a sale. But that's what he used to do. And now he's a leg, which is usually a black leg, and that's a swindler, especially a crooked bookmaker or bookie. I think that was in my Penguin edition, but I
Mm.
did look up leg and black leg to see if I could get a Like when did they start being called that? These kind of crooked, bookies, but we don't know. So nobody knows why they were originally called black. But clearly they were wearing something black things on their legs. So, but how that whole group of people got associated with that, I don't know. And then it becomes just legs. I love that, right? So they were black legs. Now it's just legs. We've all got legs, but a leg specifically meant somebody kind of swindle you out of a bet. Well, Pickwick finds 27. When he goes in, there's a guy trying to spit out the window on somebody below. Really? That's the fun that they're having. And they're very upset when they come in that somebody is missing, because now they've had a room for 3, now they have 4 in their room. That's not as pleasant, clearly. Little had they really talked to him a little more, they would have realized, hey, this guy's got money. We could actually live a lot better if he stayed with us. But instead, they right away tell him, like, what will you take to be paid out? The regular chummage is 2 and 6. Will you take 3 bob? Pickwick's like, what's going on? He doesn't understand prisons, how it works. And they let him know that you can not only do they offer him 3 bob, which is what, 3 shillings, right?
I believe so. Yeah,
Bob's a shilling. And so 2 and 6 would have been 2.5 shillings. And so they're offering above the market rate and a gallon of beer, but he's got to drink it on the spot. So, which means I think they will help him drink it. And then the 3 chums inform Mr. Pickwick in a breath that money was in the fleet just what money was out of it. This is Mr. Pickwick learning, what it's like to be in, debtor's prison. And he can spend whatever money he would spend outside to live in a certain conditions. He can find ways to spend it in here to live in certain conditions. Never going to live as nicely as outside, but at least he doesn't, he wouldn't have to live with these guys spitting out the window on each other.
Same way in a lot of prisons today, where people can get better food, have all sorts of benefits, as long as they've got the money to pay for it all.
Yep. Even furniture, he goes to Roker and he's like, oh, well, yeah, and then you'll need furniture. I'll hire the furniture. I got the perfect room. A Chancery prisoner who has been there long enough to have lost his friends, fortune, home, and happiness, and to have acquired the right of having a room to himself. The Chancery prisoner is someone waiting on a Chancery, a case in Chancery court, but he's been waiting so long, he lost all his money, and now he's in debtor's prison, and just Bleak House, right? I mean, that's just what it reminds me of, the Jarndyce and Jarndyce, and he'll later write in Bleak House. And he decides, sure, he'll rent his room. He has no money, so he's going to rent his room to Mr. Pickwick. And Mr. Pickwick, and the description of him here is just, grim too. He was a tall, gaunt, cadaverous man in an old greatcoat and slippers with sunken cheeks and a restless, eager eye. His lips were bloodless and his bones sharp and thin. God help him. I mean, that's from the narrator. God help him. The iron teeth of confinement and privation had been slowly filing him down for 20 years. That's a really, brutal metaphor in a sense, that, to be filed down to he's, sharp and thin. Well, Mr. Pickwick says, sure, I'll buy it. I'll rent the room here from you. But if you ever need some time, to spend with some friends, you can come in. I could not be more forgotten or unheeded than I am here. I am a dead man, dead to society, the Chancery prisoner tells him. That, like, friends, what are you kidding me? He's got nothing left. And Roker, the kind of, I mean, I guess cynical, prisoner or prison staff here just says ride's rather rusty, and they're like elephants. They feel it now and then, and it makes them wild. He's got no more sympathy for this guy, and probably Roker never had sympathy for any of the prisoners here. But Mr. Pickwick does, and the narrator does. And James, just that reminder with the narrator coming in, God help him. I mean, that, the narrator is a real presence in these stories. It's not, I mean, we're not talking, free and direct discourse where it's Mr. Pickwick's point of view. No, it's the narrator, and it's Dickens really talking to people about the conditions of this place and trying to elicit their, sympathy for them as well.
Yeah, we're going to see a lot more of that in Dickens later on. Certainly in Nicholas Nickleby, but continuing on as these novels delve more and more into social issues in things like Bleak House and Little Dorrit, where the narrator's voice is quite strong.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what made Dickens such a force as a social reformer.
Yeah.
Was he's like talking directly to you.
Yeah. And now Pickwick goes to visit the poor side. Oh, if this wasn't bad enough, people, this isn't even the worst. There's also a poor side to the prison. I'd love for you to read these two paragraphs, James. The poor side of a debtor's prison, like the whole two paragraphs there. I just think it's
What page are you on?
Powerful writing. It is it's right after the Chancery. Oh, do you want to know within the issue?
Yeah, it looks like 452, the poor side of a
452.
debtor's prison.
452, yeah, the poor side of a debtor's prison.
The poor side of a debtor's prison is, as its name imports, that in which the most miserable and abject class of debtors are confined. A prisoner, having declared upon the poor side, pays neither rent nor chummage. His fees upon entering and leaving the jail are reduced in amount, and he becomes entitled to a share of some small quantities of food, to provide which a few charitable persons have from time to time left trifling legacies in their wills. Most of our readers will remember that until within a very few years past, there was a kind of iron cage in the wall of the Fleet prison, within which was posted some man of hungry looks, who from time to time rattled a money box and exclaimed in a mournful voice, "Pray, remember the poor debtors. Pray, remember the poor debtors." The receipts of this box, when there were any, were divided among the poor prisoners, and the men on the poor side relieved each other in this degrading office. Although this custom has been abolished and the cage is now boarded up, the miserable and destitute condition of these unhappy persons remains the same. We no longer suffer them to appeal at the prison gate to the charity and compassion of the passers-by, but we still leave unblotted in the leaves of our statute book, for the reverence and admiration of succeeding ages, the just and wholesome law, which declares that the sturdy felon shall be fed and clothed, and that the penniless debtor shall be left to die of starvation and nakedness. This is no fiction. Not a week passes over our heads, but in every one of our prisons for debt, some of these men must inevitably expire in the slow agonies of want if they are not relieved by their fellow prisoners.
Powerful stuff, and he's
Yeah.
not holding back at all. James, I can only wonder at what it was like, especially, I mean, what it's like maybe for people reading this now for the first time, but also the very first readers and thinking like, hey, where's the funny? Uh, like suddenly now I'm writing about some real serious social issues here that we have going on. And I can imagine it must have been a little bit of a shock for his first audience.
I mean, some of the sketches are a bit more serious, and some of these interpolated tales are maybe a bit more serious.
Yeah.
But you're right. This is not
It's invaded the
necessarily,
fun and frivolity of the Pickwickians finally.
yeah.
And and for a lot of this audience, I mean, this is sure there have been sketches before and some people had read them, but his primary audience and the growing audience it's have been Pickwick. And
Mhm.
Dickens is not wasting that opportunity. I have an audience and I have something to say, and I'm going to say it. And clearly they all accept it and grows. I mean, the sales numbers are growing still, and they will grow the next month and the month after. So until the end of it.
There's a character in Little Dorrit who is constantly saying there's a conspiracy against us, and the marshal of the Marshalsea is holding back money that's intended for the poor. And I think that ties in with what we're told here, where there was some money allocated for the very poorest on the poor side of the fleet. Uh, how much of that allocated money actually got to these folks? Apparently not much.
Yeah, not surprising. Well, after the misery of these just prisoners in general and how it relates to real life, now Dickens will take us to see a character that we already know. And he goes into this room and he sees the figure of a man brooding over the dusty fire in tattered garments and without a coat, his common calico shirt yellow and in rags, his hair hanging over his face, his features changed with suffering and pinched with famine. There sat Mr. Alfred Jingle. Um, the first time I think we're ever introduced to Jingle without hearing his voice first. Um,
Mm.
every other time he appears, you hear his, distinct clipped diction. And like, oh, there's Jingle. And here it's just seeing him abject in front of a fire. Of course, this is one of the scenes that Fizz illustrates for the issue. And here it is. Mr. Pickwick sees Job Trotter, and Job Trotter, then we'll see that in a second. He's like, Mr. Pickwick. And here's Jingle at the fire here. Um,
Notice the illustration above the fire. We have the famous print, "Am I not a man and a brother?" Uh,
oh boy, I hadn't even seen that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, this came out as the abolitionist movement was finally coming to fruition.
Yeah.
Final Because of the way the British Empire abolished slavery by moving to an apprenticeship system, full emancipation wasn't going to happen until 1838. But this, at the time that people were reading this, the emancipation of slavery, the abolition of slavery throughout the British Empire was big news. It was finally coming to fruition, and so we see Fizz is quoting that, visually quoting that here, which is maybe tying together this great reform movement, reforming abroad, reforming the empire, reforming the colonies, with
Mhm.
maybe we should also look at reforming what's going on right here.
Yeah. Yeah. Connecting the misery of, kind of the enslaved imprisonment to the misery of those imprisoned by, outdated, antiquated laws that don't, take into account their own right to be people as well. Now, that
Mhm.
might be a bit, a bit, too much appropriation for, those who are, suffering under slavery, but it's not, it's we're still dealing with, and I guess it's Fizz doing this. I don't know if there was any direction towards adding it to it. It
Yeah,
seems like a
frequently I don't know of anything relating to this particular image in Dickens's letters, but frequently he and Fizz Haplo Knight Brown would talk over what's going to
yeah,
be in the illustration. But I think a lot of times these small things like this, Fizz would sort of do on his
yeah,
own, but
that's Fizz.
knowing
Yeah,
that he wanted to comment on what was going on. So like in Martin Chuzzlewit, there's a scene where Martin's about to be swindled, and in the corner you see a spider catching a fly.
mhm.
uh and so that was the sort of sly thing that he wanted to do, put just sort of on the periphery of these images something that is not exactly what we're seeing, but is commenting upon it.
Yeah. And these are all described, this guy's described in the passage. The older man and the child are described. But I don't think this is, and I find this fascinating too, this, sad looking woman watering this, meager plant here at the window. Like, it's not it's not going to survive in this. I mean, you get the feeling like
Yeah.
you just look at it, and but she still finds the need to, to water. And people have carved their names on the wall here, and I'm
Mhm.
just really hoping it might be something obscene written that they got away with, but I don't think so. It's just literally people's names. Well, he has seen him there, and then Job Trotter comes in, and Mr. Pickwick, and then Jingle's like, hey, and then we get his strange diction. Mr. So it is, queer place, strange things, serves me right, very. And that's it. He's not he still he still speaks the same way, but there's no fun to it anymore. Um and Mr. Pickwick asked to speak to him in private. Certainly. Can't step far. No danger of overwalking yourself here. Spike Park. Grounds pretty. Romantic, but not extensive. Open for public inspection. Family always in town. Housekeeper desperately careful. Very. Um, Trying to be funny, but it doesn't really work. He tells Pickwick he's, lived on a pair of boots a whole fortnight, a silk umbrella ivory handle for a week, meaning he sold these, to get money to live. And Mr. Pickwick easily perceived that his recklessness was assumed, and looking him full but not unkindly in the face, saw that his eyes were moist with tears. And after another little talking here, Jingle finally covers his face with his hands and sobs like a child. He is can't put up that, front anymore. He's been reduced to circumstances that he can't get past anymore. So, of course, Mr. Pickwick gives him money, and Job Trotter money, and this is his great villain, right? Like this is his nemesis. And the second Mr. Jingle is in, disgraced, distraught circumstances, Mr. Pickwick is there to help him as quickly as he can. Um, Sam shows up again. Sam comes back, and I think we have another Wellerism. He tells Sam, "You can't be here. Old men may come here through their own heedlessness and suspicion, and young men may be brought here by the selfishness of those they serve. It is better for those young men in every point of view that they should not remain here. Do you understand me, Sam? And Sam's like, yeah, I think I see your drift. And if I do see your drift, 'tis my opinion that you're coming it a great deal too strong, as the male coachman said to the snowstorm. Then it overtook him. That Wellerism I got pretty quickly. Mr. Pickwick is letting him go. You have to go. You have to leave me. You can't be here serving me. Go. One of the other Pickwickens will take you in as a servant, but I can't do it, and I can't have you come and live in prison with me. So something that Dickens himself wishes, well, it happened to him. His parents let him go, but he had to go work at the blacking factory. So let's hear no more about it, Sam says, but he doesn't have a choice. And Sam literally walks out on him, just puts his hat on and leaves. Well, and this is what Sam does. This is chapter 43, showing how Mr. Sam Weller got into difficulties. This chapter begins with this description of another court scene that we see that Dickens loves to describe. This is the insolvent court. Reminder everyone that Dickens knew these places well. He worked in them. He was a clerk. He was a reporter. He lived in Furnival's Inn, which was where the Chancery Court was situated. So all this wonderful description about these places, these inns of court, he knew them very well, worked in them, lived in them. It's just really great kind of color and context for these stories. I mean, he really gives you a window into this world that he's in. And the casual visitor might suppose this place to be a temple dedicated to the genius of seediness. I like that. There's an attorney there, Mr. Solomon Pell, and he's actually then meets with Mr. Weller, Tony Weller, at a public house near there. And they meet another cabman, because there's some, I can't even figure out what's going on, James. Maybe you know better. Like, apparently there's a case that they're there for with this other cabman, and Tony Weller is there too, maybe helping him with this Mr. Solomon Pell, and they're going to go and wait and hear a judgment. Like, I don't think we get any details. I'm not wrong, I don't think. Like, I don't think we get any details about why they're there to begin with.
Well, we're told that this is where everybody goes.
Yeah.
This is
Entertainment.
Yeah, exactly. Other people's lives are at stake,
Before
but
you
that's
could
fun to
watch
watch.
court TV or trials on television, you actually had to go to the trials to watch.
Yeah.
So we literally still do this today. We just do it from our homes. I like how the cabman shows up and there's a secret handshake between them. The salutation between Mr. Weller and his friends was strictly confined to the freemasonry of the craft, consisting of a jerking round of the right wrist and a tossing of the little finger into the air at the same time. I don't know what that is, but they have a secret handshake. The cabman of the city. There's nothing really enlightening here in the story and our Pickwick about their conversations, but it's a really great example of, when you read through it, of Dickens capturing conversations of different kinds of characters. These cabmen and these lawyers and all these people going into this insolvency court, and all of the different lines that they give. And I find it fascinating, James, because none of it really has any bearing on our story, but it's all interesting stuff that Dickens is creating a world, is what he's creating for us. And it's one of the reasons why this works so well, and why I've been able to be in this world for, 15, 16 months already, and will continue to be through October of this year for 5 more months, right? July, August, September, 4 more months after today. So, well, Sam has a plan. This is why Sam shows up. He goes and sees his father. He's like, talk a little bit about the widow that Tony Weller's married to. Did you see her? Yeah, and she's drinking the pineapple rum too now, apparently. Um, uh, um, but Sam's really there to talk about Mr. Pickwick, and he tells talk about Pickwick, and he tells his father, and his father says, "Why, they'll eat him up alive, Sammy." And Sam nodded. Mr. Weller says he goes in rather raw, Sammy, and he'll come out done so exceeding brown that his most familiar friends won't know him. Roast pigeons and nothing to it, Sammy. They know that Pickwick's not going to survive being in Fleet Prison. He's far too innocent in his goodness to really survive there. Well, Sam's got a plan. He's going to borrow money from his father and then literally say, "I'm not paying you back." And then they'll go to the judge and Sam will get thrown in the prison. I mean, I love this plan. This is really funny. And Sam still wants to have his carcass. He says, the habeas corpus funny line from a few issues ago, and said Sam's habeas corpus to seize the body, to take it in, is have his carcass. The have his carcass next to the perpetual motion is one of the blessedest things as was ever made. They start the plans for that, and they go off to the Belle Sauvage to wait, the court to call them in. And the Belle Sauvage, everyone, is where we've been in this before, and Tony Weller is such a fixture at the Belle Sauvage. If you remember, when he told Sam when he got married, Sam told the story when his father got married, when the clerk asked him what his parish was, he said the Belle Sauvage was his parish. That's where he's from. And actually and it's a real place. The Belle Sauvage was a real inn in London, and it actually the back of it butted onto Fleet Prison. So it's all in the same neighborhood area. We get a Wellerism. Yeah, they asked Sam to sing a song. Do you have that one there?
The song?
Yeah, read the Wellerism. Rarely, gentlemen, said Sam, right before the song.
Right before the song. "Oh, rarely, gentlemen," said Sam. "I'm not very much in the habit of singing without the instrument, but anything for a quiet life, as the man said when he took a situation at the lighthouse."
Anything for a quiet life, when he took the situation at the lighthouse.
I guess that's a quiet life.
And they want him to sing a song, and he does. And he sings about a little song about Dick Turpin, who was the famous highwayman.
Yeah.
This song in notes I have, and I think the Pickwick and I think the Penguin edition says this was taken from it's adapted from a ballad that's in Horace Smith's Gaieties and Gravities, which is a bunch of little funny sketches and songs and actually some serious pieces. But you could find Horace Smith's Gaieties and Gravities in Google Books too, and I downloaded and I saw the song. But the Dick Turpin thing is fascinating, right? He's so famous then in Dickens's age. He's a highwayman, a robber, robbed carriages and people in the 18th century. It's kind of like Jesse James is, to Americans, is what Dick Turpin was to the Brits then. And it goes on today. There's apparently some new series on about Dick Turpin. It's a comic series, like the Unrecorded Adventures of Dick Turpin or something. It's brand new. Just been out like this year. They still love him there. He's their Jesse James, I think. That's what he is. And Ainsworth, William Henry Ainsworth, had featured Turpin in his novel Rookwood, which was published in 1834 and which was hugely popular, and it led to Ainsworth becoming briefly the best-selling author of the time.
Yeah.
Until Dickens came along. And then and Rookwood and Ainsworth are actually published by Bentley and illustrated by Cruikshank. And so it's all the same world. And Dickens has just met Ainsworth, and is now becoming friends with him. And actually, Ainsworth has been introducing Dickens to people. I think he may have introduced him to Bentley, and or something like that. But he's been helping Dickens in his career in a sense, and they're becoming friends. And people at the time would have associated, if they saw Dick Turpin, they probably would have thought of Ainsworth's novel Rookwood, in which Turpin is in. So,
and Ainsworth replaced Dickens as the editor of Bentley's.
Yes, when
and
very soon we'll get tired of it. Yeah,
and saw, I believe, their subscriptions go up. So at this time, Dickens had not yet conquered Ainsworth. Ainsworth was still the guy who was outselling Dickens.
Yes, definitely. But it will change,
Yeah.
And Pickwick is so popular that it really, becomes what most people are, or the thing that people think is probably going to be what will go on in the future. But Dickens changes that. Like Oliver Twist is not Pickwick. And he's already changing. Sam is not going to pay. He says, I'm not going to pay you back. It literally takes money from his, father. He pulls out a big pocketbook and pulls out all the stuff out of his pocketbook and gives Sam the money. And then Sam says, I'm not paying you back. And he says, I'll give bills for the amount of 6 pence a month, said Sam. I won't take them, said Mr. Weller. I mean, they think this is hilarious that they're going through the actual routine of not, paying him back. And Sam is so Sam is arrested for debt. But he had made himself so extremely popular that the congregated gentlemen determined to see him to prison in a body. And they kind of march him off in this kind of celebratory parade to prison. The cavalcade, taking the time from the plaintiff, gave 3 tremendous cheers for the defendant, and having shaken hands all around, left him. Sam enters the prison, knocks for Pickwick. Come in. Sam appears in. Oh, Sam, thanks. I'm sorry I hurt your feelings, and you went off. And let me explain. And Sam's won't presently do, sir. Well, no, let me talk. Nope, not gonna talk right now. And then finally, why the fact is, said Sam with a desperate effort, perhaps I'd better see after my bed before I do anything else. Your bed? Exclaimed Mr. Pickwick in astonishment. Yes, my bed, sir. I'm a prisoner. I was arrested this here very afternoon for debt. This is how Sam will take care of Mr. Pickwick. He's now a prisoner as well. Well, if it's 40 years to come, I shall be a prisoner, and I'm very glad on it. And if it had been Newgate, it would have been just the same. Now the murder's out, and damn me, there's an end on it. With these words, which he repeated with great emphasis and violence, Sam Weller dashed his hat upon the ground in a most unusual state of excitement, and then folding his arms, looked firmly and fixedly in his master's face. I ended the last issue with Pickwick's in prison to now Sam's in prison. That's what we get for this. I didn't even stop for a mid-break today, everybody. It's blitzed right through everything. At my mid-break, I would have said, I would have thanked all of you, asked you to donate to the Rosenbach or to become a member of the Rosenbach, because that really helps support us. I did have a couple letters that I've gotten, emails, but I'll talk about those when we hit this next month. But for now, James and Pickwickians, thank you for joining us for number 15 of Pickwick Monthly. I'm very happy to have you back, James. And I will see you again, but I don't know. Am I not going to see you to the end of the run, till October, I think?
I don't know. There was some confusion as to various people not being able to make certain months. So
Kevin Quinn will be back next month for
Okay.
July. I still have to figure out August, because a couple people aren't available for that, and then Courtney in September, and then we'll see you all in October. So I think you're not till October because you couldn't do August, right? So no,
August, well, I'll probably be in
yeah,
Florida,
yeah.
but you
So
know,
no, it's fine.
if you need someone, I can zoom in from Florida, but you'd be with my parents then.
Well, I love having you with this stuff, and thank you. Coming up next month, everyone, Kevin Quinn will return to discuss number 16, chapters 44 to 46, in which Mr. Pickwick continues to help those around him in the Fleet Prison, and Mrs. Bardell comes back into our story. That'll be interesting to see how she comes back. Let me remind you to subscribe to our channel, to like these videos. You can support the Rosenbach as well through donation. Your support helps us create more programs like this and also care for our collections. You can also become a member. Membership gives you early access and discounts to programs and courses. You can find out more at our website. I am Edward G. Pettit of the Rosenbach Museum and Library. I will see you all next month for number 16 of the Pickwick Papers. Until then, James, relax in the snuggery. See ya. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.